Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Teams for Business podcast. I'm your host, Jack.
I'm Cohen.
And I'm Ivan.
Today, we'll be discussing the recent information technology outage that occurred for most of us in America at midnight on July 19th, 2024, and we'll also dive deep into the business implications for Crowdstrike, the company which is involved with this outage. So here's a little bit more background information about the outage. The outage was caused by one of CrowdStrike's faulty cloud-based security software updates, which during the update disabled several parts of computer systems and softwares, most of them which were affecting Microsoft Windows users. And around 8.5 million computers were affected by this outage, and most of them are now operating normally while some of them are still struggling to reboot. The outage also temporarily paused many broadcasting, bank, shop, and airline operations and ended up costing $1 billion in repairs. Lastly, Apple devices were unaffected by this outage. So for the first question, what are some lessons that you think the cybersecurity sector can take away from this outage? And what are some improvements that can be made to strengthen cybersecurity and prevent these disruptions?
Well, I can start off with this, but I was pretty aware of during the situation that it was not like it wasn't the fault of someone hacking into the system or abusing the system. It was an internal error by CrowdStrike because they uploaded faulty code to millions of devices all over the country, which caused a blue screen of death with the Microsoft devices kind of rebooting and then hitting an error because of this code in the cybersecurity package that CrowdStrike sent out to all of these devices. So some lessons, definitely first glaring issue would be have some sort of proofreading process with all the updates being pushed out in the future. And I probably will guess that they would probably do proofreading now that this had happened. But definitely proofreading a lot, and also I think it also exposed the very uh, vol- uh very like how do you say it, like fragile nature of the cybersecurity sector right now, because it's dominated by one firm with like three or four other firms, smaller, much smaller firms that are doing cybersecurity as well. Um, but it definitely highlighted that if someone in some time finds a weakness or a vulnerability in CrowdStrike, then they can impact like 80-90% of all devices, Microsoft devices, right? And it's just a very big vulnerability. And I think that it kind of got uh, put in the highlight because once CrowdStrike goes down, so does most of the economy. But as opposed to maybe a smaller cybersecurity firm who supplies maybe only a few thousand, or that is a much smaller number than CrowdStrike, then the issue wouldn't be as big. So I think there'll be a more focus on, in CrowdStrike, it'll probably be a more focus on like diversifying each. It's not like one single firmware that is across all of devices. It's like the same firmware but with different tweaks for each device. Something like kind of like in biology when we talk about like genetic variability, like some sort of variability between each device. So if one vulnerability is found, it doesn't really impact all the devices, so it kind of limits the damage in especially for CrowdStrike. So I think that might be something they maybe look into, or actually like a completely new idea for cybersecurity.
Yeah, I agree. Just to add on a little bit, I think that, like making sure you have that like a fail-safe mechanism just to go back off of in case this stuff ever happens again. I think especially because what happened was so severe. I do think that CrowdStrike is going to want to implement more like thorough testing before they deploy any updates, kind of proofread, like Ivan said, just making sure that like this was super costly and they like their stock, not only like their customers losing money, the stock price is like has been going down a lot. So just making sure this proofreading, thorough testing, and doing whatever they can to prevent anything like this from happening in the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just to add on maybe a little bit more to both what Ivan and Kyvan just suggested, I feel like even like during the when the updates are released or when everything is working properly, like I think it would still be beneficial for CrowdStrike employees to keep tabs on all the code and all the things that are being updated because and in doing so they're doing frequent checkups to make sure that there's like no faulty code that could be like caused by some issue or later like potentially like there could be like someone who clicks on something or and that could trigger any sort of bad response or bad code that could lead into like a bad error for the computer. And in doing so, I think CrowdStrike employees by checking up on code regularly to see if to see whether things are going right, things are going wrong, they can prevent these outages from happening even before they potentially happen. Well, I understand like right now, like this it occurred during when the update was occurring, but still like in the future when is dealing with potential updates or just making sure they need to frequently just check up on like how the current system is working, making sure that's working properly. So in case something is triggered by a potential like new update, so these outages will be prevented in the future. But I also think CrowdStrike would need to train more employees to do that because they need to have a lot of like backup employees. They need to make sure that the cybersecurity is working properly because I feel like during this outage we kind of exposed how important cybersecurity is for the internet. So those are obviously very important things. And I do think that this will eventually cost money to do because CrowdStrike will obviously have to hire people and maybe spend more on training programs, but ultimately for the health of the internet and just for the cybersecurity sector in general, I think that would be very beneficial. So moving on, maybe into discussing a little bit of like small businesses and how they were impacted. I think it's obvious that a lot of small businesses, especially smaller like shop businesses that are like they just offer local products to wherever they are situated. They rely on technology, Microsoft Windows computers, and that obviously involves a lot of cybersecurity. So how do you think businesses will react? How do you think businesses have reacted to this outage?
Yeah. So I think kind of going back to what I said, right? I think the door has been open to smaller cybersecurity firms who may not have suffered such an outage. I mean, not small necessarily, but mid-sized cybersecurity firms like Palo Alto Networks is a pretty decently well known, especially in the Bay Area, cybersecurity firm. But I think it opened the door, especially for a smaller business, to be like, looking for alternatives because maybe CrowdStrike is definitely most popular out there, but it's also pretty vulnerable based on whatever happened, and they can will probably look for other alternatives, maybe even cheaper alternatives for cybersecurity. Um, or like especially I think for smaller firms, maybe like sole proprietorships, like just small business in general, cybersecurity may not be such a huge issue for smaller businesses, but um, definitely a bigger like mid-sized to bigger companies may see like this as a vulnerability and change cybersecurity providers. And I think that will kind of be a prompted choice, but I don't believe that is happening at a very large scale currently. But definitely, I can see how smaller to mid-sized business could have changed cybersecurity or even ditched cybersecurity in such a way because cybersecurity, even though it may be like, oh, we can protect you from outside threats, but that also became a threat, right? Literally just knocked out millions of computers in one day, in one push. So I think that might be changing.
Yeah, so I guess the whatever the incident with CrowdStrike kind of like I guess it's a wake up call to lots of these companies that rely on them that even though CrowdStrike is the major player in this field and they like no matter what they're not 100% safe from anything. So it's just kind of with this whole cybersecurity field that's so big I think I guess being more diversified and just knowing like knowing that there are so many improvements that you can make in this industry. So changing, not necessarily relying on CrowdStrike by itself, but implementing like other companies as well, like Palo Alto Networks. I know there's other different like cybersecurity companies that are pretty big and competing with CrowdStrike. So I do think that after this, the CrowdStrike definitely lost some of its, I guess, market share, market power. And these companies are looking to, I guess, build up their cybersecurity elsewhere.
I actually have an interesting take on this. Like, I feel I agree with the fact that Kyvan just mentioned that CrowdStrike obviously lost a lot of market share because of this outage. I'm gonna it might be a weird analogy to connect this with NVIDIA, but this is what I'm gonna say. So, what I think is I think NVIDIA has more of a monopoly in the GPU market than CrowdStrike has a monopoly in the cybersecurity market. Um, I don't live in Palo Alto, so I don't live in Silicon Valley, so I'm not exactly sure how true this is. Maybe Ivan and Kyvan can maybe chime in on that. But I genuinely think that CrowdStrike is has to find a way to deal with competitors. Like, I think Nvidia right now, there's obviously a lot of competitors in the market, but they're still really dominant. They're still doing a lot of R&D. But CrowdStrike they've been impacted a lot by this outage, and this is a perfect opportunity for smaller cybersecurity companies to come up and maybe take advantage of maybe other small businesses around the country that are already thinking, oh, maybe CrowdStrike is maybe too risky based off of this outage. Let's try maybe a backup plan. Because we all know that these small businesses are always like looking for a backup plan. They've obviously seen that this outage has done such a big impact on their business and even some customer satisfaction and financial loss. So businesses are definitely looking at how this outage has affected those factors of their business. So as I think as a result, like some people are thinking maybe we should ditch CrowdStrike or maybe we should add another backup system, cybersecurity system in addition to CrowdStrike. So if CrowdStrike does go down again or doesn't become as dominant as it is again, like it could be an easy switch to another system that may be more effective, that might be safer and less prone to these different outages. So I think CrowdStrike needs to be watchful of their competitors because if they have another outage, it's very likely that that they will lose another big portion of their market share. Also, just I even though despite the outage, like CrowdStrike, just like Ivan mentioned before, is the leading cybersecurity company in the world as of right now. And as of like tonight, August 11, CrowdStrike stock has been down around 30% since the outage. And because of this company's like the company image as a cybersecurity leader, many analysts have urged people to buy the stock at its current price. But obviously, over the past few weeks, like the technology sector hasn't been doing well as of late either. So, what rating would you give CrowdStrike stock and why?
I I think that I would probably also say buy. And the reason, and it's noteworthy that, as Jack said, that the tech market in general has taken a hit over the past few weeks, and we have seen this actually globally, like especially in Japan, the stock market was hit pretty bad. And what the guess is that there's basically a few large holders who decide to sell all their holds in around the same time, and um basically because they sold off all of their stocks, the stock market took a plunge. It might not necessarily be because the tech market is doing bad, but it's basically due to a few large stake people with a large stake in certain companies decide to sell off and maximize the profits at a specific time point. And but for CrowdStrike specifically, I think the cybersecurity market is definitely very interesting because, if, let's say, I one of us decide to start a cybersecurity firm today out of our garage, we don't get any customers. It's because cybersecurity gains value the more customers it has, because there's obviously more money into customer service. So if you have a larger cybersecurity firm, you'll probably get 24/7 coverage, customer support coverage, right? So if there's a small issue, you'll probably get support from the cybersecurity company. But also, like, since the cybersecurity company is larger, it has more customers, so it knows more vulnerabilities quicker than other firms, which might be smaller and may not have such a big reach, and they can patch it quicker. One, because they have more resources. Two, they have more eyes and ears on specific cybersecurity threats. And I think for CrowdStrike, even though they got hit, but it was not an outside job; it was an inside job, right? It was like because of faulty upload, and that can be really easily fixed, which is just adding another stage of proofreading. It might slow down the rate upgrades are passed out, but I think CrowdStrike will just bounce back because, as I said, it gains more value the more customers it serves, and you can't really beat the amount of customers CrowdStrike has right now. So the stock, in my opinion, would definitely bounce back up soon.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, CrowdStrike still has a strong market position. Like no matter, like despite what happened, it's still the leading company in terms of cybersecurity. I don't think that it's going anywhere. Even though there are other companies and there's going to be risk. That's why the stock's already dropped like what, 40 something percent. So I think at this point, I do think it is a buy. It's a more of a cautious buy, but I think that looking into the future, just I don't think like cybersecurity is not going anywhere. They need what CrowdStrike is offering, and I just think that these companies, CrowdStrike has to give these companies a reason to trust them again. But I think that overall, it's just has such strong like fundamentally, it's just a strong company that I think it will bounce back up, especially within the next year. As over these past couple weeks, the entire tech industry hasn't been doing great either. So I think it's just market cycles playing a part in this as well. So I do think it is a buy.
Yeah, I also agree that it is a buy. I think that even though CrowdStrike was sort of responsible for the incident, for like the outage, I think it's the outage in general was still also a wake-up call for the increasing need of like stronger cybersecurity systems. And that obviously provides a favorable market position for CrowdStrike because they're the leading company. And as Ivan said before, the more customers you get, the more people are connected to your cybersecurity system, that means the more revenue that you eventually get as well. So based on that, CrowdStrike will probably bounce back. Currently, market conditions, I still think that we are in a bit of a bull market. Obviously, there have been some calls for recession right now because of the recent tech trends, the the trends with the technology market, and obviously CrowdStrike and cybersecurity are obviously a big part of that. So, but I think we will still need. I'm not exactly sure in terms of like where the investigation is in terms of if they're still investigating what happened with the outage. But I think we'll still need to watch carefully what CrowdStrike are going to do after the outage, what changes they're going to make, and then we'll see. I think we can see what they're doing because if they make a wrong move, that could obviously lead to another setback, another dip in price, and maybe they'll lose another big portion of their market share, allowing for another company to come in and pick up that market share and maybe steal a bit of CrowdStrike's customers. But I still think right now, as long as CrowdStrike don't make any mistakes, they add a little bit more they add a little bit more people to do frequent checkups or just watch over things just to make sure that updates go through smoothly without any errors. I think CrowdStrike will bounce back, but we'll have to see. Um, and then moving on to our last question, many of Microsoft's computers were involved in this outage, and I think this has sparked a little bit of a slight decline in Microsoft's current customer satisfaction. And they are deploying a lot of engineers and cybersecurity experts to actually work directly with with Microsoft customers and users. So do you guys think that this is a good strategy to increase customer satisfaction as they recover from this outage and many of the other outages they've had in the past? If, and also, what else can they do to strengthen their business profile after they've also like taken a hit?
Yeah, so obviously customer satisfaction is a very important part. I feel like in this case, Microsoft is going the conservative route. Like, let's say you have a restaurant and a customer comes and buys a a, a, a bowl of soup, right? And then they decide to sit in the corner where there's like a beehive for no reason, right? And then the bee lands in their soup or a fly lands in their soup and they get pissed off. And they go to the cashier and then be like, hey, there's something in my soup and I'm very pissed. I'm very angry. And if the cashier is like, oh my God, you're stupid. You're the one who sat next to the beehive. What the hell am I, at fault here? And the customer obviously would be very, even more mad if they're not already very mad, right? But if the cashier is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me get you a free bowl of another soup, and I'll give you another thing, and it'll be like if you overemphasize your empathy or overemphasize your kind of customer support, then they'll be like, oh, am I in the wrong here? Like, am I as the customer overreacting to whatever's happening? Like, it's only a bee in my soup, it's only a fly in my soup, and but they're giving me a free refund, and they're also giving me like ice cream or something, right? Like, the customer then feels like, oh, am I in the wrong now for complaining about such a small issue? And I think Microsoft is kind of going that route, which is, they don't want to mess with, I think, because in recent decades, the tech field has been increasingly saturated. And especially with the economy, Microsoft is taking the safe route and being like, hey, I got to improve all my customer satisfactions, or else I don't know what's going to happen, right? The economy might hit another downturn very soon. Or even Apple might, or a new competitor might emerge in the market. Like, although I do feel like Microsoft may have overreacted because, especially in the field of computers, they don't have a competitor. Like, yeah, obviously you have Mac OS, but what else, right? Linux, but nobody uses Linux unless you're like a computer nerd, right? So I don't think Microsoft really has a competitor here. But as I said, I think they're just taking the safe route, especially with other sectors in the technology where it might be more competitive, like the cybersecurity, doing as much as you can for your customer, even if it takes at a loss, I think just serves you better in the long term, because the customer be like, hey, even though this happened, this bad thing happened, aka CrowdStrike, right? But the amount of support I've gotten from them is very good support, and I makes you want to stick with them, right? Even though it did happen, but it's the customer satisfaction wouldn't tank. Maybe if it's done correctly, it might increase as well.
Yeah, I think what Microsoft's doing is pretty necessary just because it's kind of like damage control. They need to get something that will like do something immediately that will reassure the customers and make sure that, yeah, they're not like disregarding the customer's concerns or their needs. But I feel like I don't think this is like a long-term situation, just putting a bunch of people, like a bunch of these experts to work directly with customers. Like long term, I feel like that's not going to stick as well. I just think that they can do this temporarily while they strengthen the other areas of their business that will get and after customers kind of see results happen, I think that's the best way to kind of show them that they can recover. They've recovered fully from this outage and they're going on to be stronger than they were before. So I think that this is definitely a needed part in this process, but they still need to do a lot more to kind of fully gain back that trust.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been said here about like how Ivan said that they're taking the conservative route by protecting the customer satisfaction by offering all these different services and tech support from like straight from engineers and cybersecurity experts. And that I feel like maybe we have to remember here that Apple computers or any Apple systems were not affected by this at all. So if they didn't do that, what if some customers go like, oh, I'm just gonna switch to Apple. I'm gonna get MacBook instead of using Windows. And even though some people may think that that may do some damage to their business in terms of like they think Microsoft Windows, oh, they use Excel a lot, they use like Microsoft Edge, all these services. But Apple computers have turned out to be a lot safer and less vulnerable from these like outages or just like being having their files completely wiped out. So I think this was a very necessary move for Microsoft to intervene here, because if they didn't intervene and provide that support, maybe some of these customers, maybe some of these businesses are like, let's go to Apple, let's try something new. And then it turns out Apple's a lot safer and they might just stick with Apple. And as a result, Microsoft might lose a little bit of um, lose some consumers there. So this, I think, is definitely needed. And just like what Kevin said, it will probably not be long term, because the cybersecurity experts, those engineers, they're going to keep doing their engineering or keep doing the research to keep developing new products for Microsoft to potentially improve their cybersecurity sectors. And I do think that maybe one thing that Microsoft could do to maybe strengthen their business profile a little bit is to maybe see if there's any sort of solution with AI that they can implement into cybersecurity or just detecting cybersecurity threats in general. I feel like that could be very beneficial in the future, especially since AI power has been rising and the need for cybersecurity has become increasingly evident, as shown by this outage. So I think maybe taking advantage of putting AI and cybersecurity together may be very beneficial for Microsoft. So that's it for today, and thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Teams for Business podcast. I'm your host, Jack, and see you on the next episode.